Hi, Katie. This is definitely the best way to talk about this process. As you can see here, this is the sample you sent me, and here's something I just, well, I'd like to say I just whipped it up, but it was about 10 steps, 10 distinct steps. And so the best way to describe what it is that I'm doing is actually just to show you how I came up with this. And this is pretty close. I mean, what we have here is a type that follows a bit of a path. So we've got a type on a path effect. We've got a 3D extrude, and we also have a bit of a carved inset. You can see in these letters here. It's very faint on these letters here, but I put it in there anyway. And we had to do a little bit of carving of some letters, but you'll see what I'm talking about in just a second. I'm just going to pan over here, and we're going to see where we started. I've just taken a bit of Bernard MT condensed. That's pretty close. I'm not exactly sure what type font you're thinking of, but I've applied it to a path, and I can do that just by creating any path using the pen tool, for example, and selecting under the type tool the type on a path tool. And if I just click anywhere on any path, you can see I get a blinking cursor, and that line disappears, and I can start typing. And my type is currently has an offset or a subset, so I can go over my characters here and play around with this, but you can see I can set that to 0, so it's sitting back on the line. There's a couple of things we can do with this type on a path here, just to let you know that you can see that there's type here, a path that it's sitting on, and then there's these blue lines, one on this end, one in the middle of that path, and one in the end. If you can see, if I hover over top of those blue lines, you can see I get a sort of a changing arrow, and that allows me to move this type around if I want to. I can bring this type in and cut into it if I want to. I can also flip it to the other side of the line using those controls. So that is essentially how I created this effect here. And again, it's just type on a line, type on a path. From there, I expanded that type, and you can do that by selecting the type and going to the object drop down menu and selecting expand, or go to the type drop down menu and select outline fonts. Where is it? Well, I don't have any fonts selected, so it can't show me that. But either way, you can do that. Object expand works just fine. And once I have it expanded, and you can see this is a version of that expanded type, I take my knife tool. Now the knife tool is hidden underneath the eraser tool here, so normally you see the eraser. But with the knife tool selected, I can cut through any graphic shape like that. And what I did was I just cut off the bottom part of this S. And you'll see why in just a second. And I'm going to move down to the next part. And what I did is I added a spiral to that S, and I can do that over here using my spiral tool. Now normally you see the line segment tool, but if I click and hold, I get the spiral tool, and I can drag out a spiral. I can add more segments to that spiral just by hitting the up arrow on my keyboard, or not. Let's see, that doesn't seem to be wanting to do that. Maybe, oh, there we go. My keyboard is a little bit temperamental these days. So anyway, I'm hitting the up and down arrows on my keyboard to add and subtract segments. But that gives you a spiral. Now I can also hold down the command button to stretch that out a little bit. It took a little bit of playing around before I got a spiral that worked the way I wanted it to. Once I got a spiral that looked okay, I could add a stroke weight to that, something to the effect of about 20 points seemed to work. And I can at any time choose my direct selection arrow, and I can subtract some of the segments from this just by clicking on the anchor points and just deleting them. And I think I went to about there. From here, I just had to position this in the right spot. I rotated it around a little bit and scaled it down. But once I got it into roughly the position that I wanted, of course, this is just a very ugly looking blunt end that we have here. But we have a tool over here in the toolbox called the width tool, and that allows me to resize any part of this that I choose. Now, I made the end thin here, but in order to match this sort of effect, I would have to come a little bit into that stroke and then just thicken that up a little bit. And then to match the width here, I would just thicken up that area here, maybe take that area down. It takes a little playing with this width tool to get this to work just right, but with it you can create that sort of spiral effect on the bottom of your S. And I did the same thing with the bottom of this S. You can see I cut off the bottom of that S and added a stroke and changed its width using that width tool. And finally, once I had added everything that the way I wanted it, I selected everything and expanded it and had it all turned into one outline shape. So that was the first set of steps. Now from here, I'm going to move up to step 6. From here, I added some fills and strokes. Now the best way to see what's happening is to open up the appearance panel and see all the different extra fills that I've added here. And you can see that I've also added some offset path effects and some transform effects. Now you might wonder, what is that doing? Well, so let me just quickly show you how to create this effect here. First of all, I'm just going to create one letter. I'm just going to click M. Just enlarge that just a little bit. And what I want to do, well, normally what we do is we color our type using the color panel here. But in this case, I'm going to select my color panel, and I'm going to select both the fill and the stroke and set them both to none. What we're going to do is we're going to add all our fills and strokes through the appearance panel here. And you can see with that type selected, I can add a new fill down here. You can see I now see a new fill of set to black. In fact, I'm going to set 2 new fills. Now the main color that we want this type to be is white. So I'm going to select the bottom black fill and I'm going to set that to white. Now the effect that we're trying to create, this carved blue effect, is going to be created out of this fill here. So I'm going to select this fill and I'm going to set that to light blue. Now what I want to do is I want to inset this blue so we can see a little bit of the white behind it. And how we're going to do that, with that blue fills targeted, I'm going to go to the effects drop down menu. I'm going to select path and I'm going to select offset path. Now typically if I select preview here, you can see with a positive value it sends that path outwards so that we get a positive path. But if I set this to a negative value and then set this to something like 0.5, you can see that that blue has been carved into. Now this will really become clear if I select OK and change the color of the stroke. I'm going to set that to red, and I'm just going to bring that below my other fill colors, and I'm just going to bump up the fill to something like that. So now you can see what's happened to that that blue. In fact, what I want to do is I think I'm going to take that blue and I'm going to offset it, rather than 0.05, I'm going to set it to offset it to 0.02. We'll say OK. There we go. Now you can see that blue color has just been offset or inset just a little bit. Now I need to create one more fill, a white fill, that will sit over top of that blue and act as the sort of mask for it. So I'm going to select that blue color again. I'm going to hit the add new fill, and this time I'm going to select white, and I need to go back down to my effects menu with this fill target and select path, offset path, and this time I'm going to select -0.3. I'm going to say OK, and now you can see that that has been carved into, but I need to offset or move that over just a little bit so that it doesn't sit right in the middle of that blue. So I'm going to target that top white fill, go to the effects drop down menu. This time I'm going to go to distort and transform, select transform, click on preview, and I'm just going to move that just a fraction over, something like to that effect right there, maybe something even less. There we go. Say OK. And that's how we create that offset effect within type. So once I've applied that appearance to the shapes that I have, I'm going to go and apply a 3D extrude effect to that shape. Just to show you what I mean, I'm going to go and select this shape here. I'm going to go to the effects drop down menu, and I'm going to go to 3D effect, extrude, and bevel. And what I can do is I can arrange this so that it has that position that I want, basically going up from left to right, looking at it from the bottom up. And I'm going to select no shading for this effect. And just to see what we're looking at, I'm going to go preview. And now this might take a few moments. Your computer is going to have to do a lot of thinking here. But essentially what you're going to get, we'll say OK, is something that may or may not look the way you want it. Now, I've had some issues with the 3D rendering effect, giving me some unexpected results. Some results are better than others. In fact, this is probably not so hot, but I got this effect where the red line shows up. Now, what often happens is you might have to go and select that object again, open it up in the appearance panel, and you can see if I go down to the bottom, you can see this 3D extrude and bevel effect has been applied. And sometimes I find that I might have to, if I select preview here, I can view the effect, but I might actually have to rotate the object in 3D space just a little bit. Just see how that, a little bit of adjustment. Of course, it has to resolve its visibility again, but well, look at that. See, now that one actually turned out much better. Now that red line is working out. So again, sometimes small little adjustments will make all the difference. So I'm going to say OK. But you can still see that this is not quite what we're looking for. I mean, there's some gaps within this effect here. So we're going to have to do something in order to make this look a little bit better. I'm going to take this effect. I'm going to bring down another version of it. And I'm going to expand it. I'm going to go to the object drop down menu, expand, and that's going to take that entire effect and turn it into vector shapes. You can see if I click off it, there you go. It's still not looking the way we want it to, however, so I'm going to select everything and I'm going to turn that all into one shape by opening up the Pathfinder panel and clicking on Unite, and that's going to turn that all into one shape. Now there's some little objects within here that we can clean up. If you select your direct selection tool and click on some of these white areas, you can just click on them and delete them. If you need to, you can go to Command Y to sort of see the some of these areas, and you can just select them like that. What you want is eventually just a nice clean red outline like this. Now the next thing I did was I took that same 3D effect that I had had earlier, and this time I'm going to open up the appearance panel and I'm going to go to that 3D effect, and where in the last version I had it extruded, we can see where it has extrude depth here. Let's click preview. I've got this set to 0, meaning that there's no depth. All I'm seeing is the same angle of that 3D extrusion that we had earlier, but with no back extrusion, or this shape back here. I'm going to say OK. And when I place this over top of that 3D extruded shape, now I've got something that's much cleaner. And now I can do something that I'm going to go up here. I believe that's where, or is it down here? Yeah, no, it's up here. Now I'm going to take that red shape that I had earlier and I'm going to duplicate it. And now let me just go back down here. I'm going to take this red shape that I have here and I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to hold down the option button and click, whoops, I'm going to hold down the option button and drag out another version of that. I'm going to take that version and turn that into a grayscale like you see here. I'm going to go to my gradient tool and apply a black and white gradient. The reason I'm doing that is that I'm going to be turning this gradient fill into halftone dots that you see down here. So the process to do that is to create a halftone, a gradient fill from white to black, and I'm going to select that object and I'm going to apply an effect. I'm going to go to the effects drop down menu, select pixelate, and I'm going to go select color halftone. And for this effect, each channel 1 to 4 should be the same value. I choose 45. That just tells me what angle the dots are going to fall at. You can make that any value, but as long as it's the same. And this value here, 8, is the size of pixels that you're going to use. I found 8 worked well for this effect. I'm going to say OK. And you can see that that shape has now got a halftone dot effect applied to it. Now, I would like to be able to recolor this effect. I would basically like to be able to work with these dots as if they were vector shapes rather than an effect. So what I need to do now is I need to take this shape and rasterize it. I'm going to go to Object, Rasterize, and I'm going to keep the pixels per inch fairly high. Say OK. And I now have an object, a rasterized object, that I can trace. And you can see whenever I have a rasterized object, the Live Trace button comes up here. I'm going to click on this disclosure triangle and go to Tracing Options. I'm going to leave this as black and white and threshold at 128. The thing that I'm going to do, though, is click on Ignore White. I want to get rid of all the white that's part of this rasterized image. I'm going to select Trace. It'll take a couple moments. And I now have a black and white vector image. Although when I hover over it, you can see that the bounding box is there, but there doesn't look like there's any vector information here. What I need to do is I need to click on this Expand button, and that turns all those black dots into vector shapes that I can now open up my swatches panel and color. And you can see that's what I ended up with here. And finally, I placed that vector shape over top of the red extruded shape, and then this 3D type that was 3D, I went and expanded that so that this becomes a vector shape. That's a vector shape, and the red shape behind it is a vector shape. Now that is this effect in 10 easy steps. Have fun.